Hollywood might be the ultimate dream factory, but strip away the red carpets and the million-dollar smiles and you find a playground where massive egos run completely unchecked. Some of the biggest legends in show business, the icons who gave us performances that defined generations and movies that will live forever, are actually remembered by insiders for some pretty shocking behaviour when the cameras stopped rolling, even though the public adored them. A lot of these A-list stars and visionary directors earned nasty reputations for being impossible to work with, abusive and just plain cruel to their co-stars, crews and loyal fans. We are about to take a deep dive into the ugly underbelly of Hollywood's elite, exposing everyone from legendary directors who tripped on their own power to famous actors who made life a living hell for their colleagues and turned film sets into absolute chaos. These stories peel back the layers of PR to show the real people behind the masks. While their artistic contributions might have built the industry we know today, their toxic antics behind the scenes have left a permanent black mark on their legacies. These 20 infamous figures prove that fame often amplifies the worst traits in human nature, showing us that the line separating a creative genius from a total jerk is a lot thinner than any of us want to admit. So let's tear down the velvet rope and shine a spotlight on the darker corners of Tinseltown as we count down the 20 biggest jerks in the history of Hollywood. First up on our list is William Frawley. William Frawley is forever cemented in pop culture history as Fred Mertz, the grumpy but lovable neighbour on the groundbreaking sitcom I Love Lucy. His on-screen dynamic with Vivian Vance was the stuff of legend, and his impeccable comedic timing was a huge reason that show became an all-time American classic. But once the director yelled cut, Frawley was anything but lovable. He was known around town for his rough attitude, a hair-trigger temper, and a serious drinking problem that made him a notorious nightmare to deal with on set. Frawley's battle with the bottle was an open secret in the industry, and his heavy drinking often made him a total liability during the production schedule, to keep the show from derailing Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. The power couple running I Love Lucy had to put a strict 3 strikes and you're out clause in his contract. Basically, if Frawley showed up intoxicated or messed up production more than 3 times, he would be handed a pink slip immediately. Even with that career-ending threat hanging over his head, Frawley managed to survive the show's entire 9-year run, although it was a bumpy ride filled with constant friction involving the cast and crew. The most infamous part of Frawley's workplace toxicity was his intense hatred for Vivian Vance, the actress who played his wife Ethel Mertz. The bad blood between them was so thick that they refused to acknowledge each other's existence unless the cameras were rolling. While their constant sniping looked funny on TV, it was actually a reflection of a deeply toxic dynamic that made the set uncomfortable for everyone for nearly a decade. Despite all the drama, Frawley's performance as Fred Mertz is still iconic, even if his real-life antics made him one of the most difficult people to employ in the business. Moving on to Milton Berle. Milton Berle was an absolute pioneer in the television landscape, basically the guy responsible for getting Americans to buy TV sets in the first place. With affectionate nicknames like Uncle Milty, and Mr. Television Berle's massive charisma and sharp wit made him arguably the most recognisable face during the golden age of TV. You cannot deny his impact on comedy or his groundbreaking role in the medium's history. However, when you look behind the curtain, stories about Berle paint a picture of a guy who wasn't nearly as funny to be around. Famous for his suffocating ego and domineering personality, Berle developed a reputation for being a control freak who was rude and completely unprofessional to those beneath him. One of the biggest complaints about Berle throughout his career was his shameless habit of stealing jokes and entire bits from other struggling performers. While borrowing material was somewhat common back then, Berle was so brazen and unapologetic about it that he earned serious resentment from his peers. He would frequently lift another comedian's best material and claim it was his, never giving a shred of credit. This selfish behaviour burned bridges with countless comedians and really tarnished his standing within the inner circles of comedy. Berle's Most disastrous moment came decades later when he guest hosted Saturday Night Live. He completely ignored the director's cues and hijacked the live broadcast, mugging for the camera and throwing out cheesy, inappropriate ad-libs that bombed. He didn't stop there. He even started bossing around the crew, barking unsolicited orders at stagehands and lighting guys and clashing hard with the show's format. His arrogant antics caused absolute mayhem backstage, leading the SNL team to ban him from ever returning. While nobody questions Burley's talent, his massive arrogance and lack of respect for others left a permanent stain on his legacy, making him one of the most polarizing figures in entertainment. Next, we have Frank Faye. Frank Faye is often cited as the godfather of stand-up comedy, largely responsible for inventing the modern monologue style we see in clubs today. Back in the Roaring '20s, Faye was arguably the biggest star in vaudeville, raking in a mind-blowing $17,500 a week at the absolute height of his fame. His razor-sharp wit, innovative delivery and ability to hold a crowd in the palm of his hand with casual banter made him a superstar. But Faye's incredible talent was completely overshadowed by an ego the size of Manhattan and a truly abrasive personality that drove away almost everyone who tried to work with him. Colleagues described him as stuck-up, dismissive, and impossible to collaborate with. On top of that, his vocal anti-Semitism and public bigotry made him a pariah within large parts of the entertainment community. Despite being a comedic genius, Faye's inability to play nice or build real relationships eventually led to his career imploding. His personal life was just as messy, particularly his turbulent marriage to screen legend Barbara Stanwyck. The industry was buzzing with whispers about emotional and physical cruelty, sketching out a truly nightmare profile of who Faye really was when the cameras stopped rolling. The legendary funny man Milton Berle actually shared a gnarly story where Faye decided to drop a disgusting anti-Semitic slur right to his face, which pushed Berle to the breaking point. He literally laid hands on him. That beatdown just goes to show the sheer level of hatred Faye's peers harboured for the guy. Even though Faye's impact on the comedy world is historically massive, his radioactive personality and hateful antics guaranteed that his history would be defined by his ugly flaws rather than his talent. Then you have Alfred Hitchcock, who is basically the Mount Rushmore of directors, giving us masterpieces like Psycho, Rear Window and Vertigo that locked in his status as a cinema god. His game-changing style and ability to build tension rightly crowned him the master of suspense, and you cannot deny he changed movies forever. But Hitchcock's golden legacy is stained by a terrifying history of abusive, manipulative and straight-up predatory habits, particularly targeting the women he directed. Behind that genius label lurked a man who viewed his cast members not as artistic partners but as disposable props to be twisted for his own amusement. He famously went on record saying actors should be treated like cattle. One of the grossest displays of Hitchcock's twisted mindset went down during the shoot for The Birds back in 1963. Tippi Hedren, who was a fresh-faced rising star back then, unluckily became the fixation of Hitchcock's creepy obsession. He made passes at her, and when Hedren shut him down, Hitchcock decided to get even in some truly sick and calculated ways. In one absolute nightmare of a scene, he secretly swapped out the mechanical prop birds for real panicked animals without warning, Hedren leaving her to get savagely pecked and scratched over and over. The trauma was so severe that Hedren walked away with actual physical wounds and had to be rushed to a hospital. And this wasn't just a one-off bad day. Hedren spilled the tea years later that Hitchcock actively tried to nuke her entire acting career after she rejected him, using his massive clout in Hollywood to blacklist her from landing any major gigs. Hitchcock's sadistic and controlling streak wasn't limited to Hedren either. On the set of The 39 Steps, the actress Madeleine Carroll was left handcuffed to her male co-star for literal hours because Hitchcock claimed he accidentally lost the key. The outcome Carol ended up bruised and humiliated, and it was all just a sick game for Hitchcock's entertainment. These horror stories prove how his need for control manufactured a toxic, hostile workplace for the talent. While his movies stand tall as works of genius art, they will always be haunted by the dark, abusive reality of how he treated the human beings who brought those dreams into reality. Switching gears to music, Rudy Vallee was the Justin Bieber of the 1920s and 30s, worshipped for his velvet voice, magnetic stage vibes and skills on the saxophone. Clutching his trademark megaphone, he belted out ballads that made the crowd swoon and basically wrote the playbook for every pop star that came after. His celebrity status blew up way past just music as he became a heavy hitter in radio and movies, becoming a total household name across America. But strip away that charming celebrity mask and you'd find a volatile, angry man whose backstage antics frequently totally eclipsed his professional wins. Vallee's legendary short fuse and his habit of getting into wars with co-workers became the main headline of his career. During live airings of the Fleischmann's Yeast Hour, Vallee's temper tantrums were the stuff of legend. He would constantly scream at his orchestra members, shaming them in front of the whole crew. His violent streak didn't stop at the payroll either. Vallee was famous for getting into fist fights with the paparazzi, and he'd even throw down with audience members if he thought they were dissing him. His brutal management style earned him the nasty nickname of a slave driver because so many people working under him were miserable dealing with his impossible and abusive demands. Despite being a nightmare to work with, Vallee did actually help kickstart the careers of some massive names like Alice Faye and Frances Langford. While his raw talent and what he gave to the entertainment world are set in stone, his story is forever complicated by his rage issues, leaving a messy stain on Hollywood history. Then there is Lucille Ball, an absolute titan of comedy and a pioneer for women in TV, adored worldwide for playing the ditzy and lovable Lucy Ricardo in I Love Lucy. Her game-changing hustle as an actress, producer and legit studio boss completely revolutionised the biz, locking her in as one of the greatest Hollywood legends ever. But here is the kicker. Ball's real-life personality was a sharp left turn from that bubbly character we saw on TV. Her attitude when the cameras were off has been called demanding, icy and totally dismissive. Ball's rigid and I'm the boss style of socialising often made her incredibly intimidating to be around. There is one particularly notorious tale about how she treated a flight attendant on a plane. The story goes that Ball flat out refused to acknowledge the attendant's existence, forcing her assistant to pass notes back and forth, reportedly barking out, "Tell this woman!" Rumour has it that Lucille Ball wouldn't even deign to speak to the hired help. That little anecdote really underscores the massive air of superiority she sometimes flashed around, even when dealing with her own peers in the industry. Honestly, Ball's reputation was a total lightning rod. The acclaimed actor Richard Burton didn't mince words, once referring to her as a monster of staggering charmlessness. He claimed she had a complete inability to find any humour once the cameras stopped rolling. While these backstage horror stories paint a wildly different picture of Ball compared to the zany persona we saw on screen, they certainly don't diminish the heavy lifting she did for the industry. Her pioneering moves in comedy and television production remain basically unmatched, even if her personal reputation leaves behind a much more complicated and messy legacy in 2026. Now let's talk about Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, the legendary superstar of the silent film era, totally revolutionised cinema with his creation of the tramp character and his absolute masterpieces like City Lights and The Great Dictator. As a pioneer of film, both in front of the lens and behind the scenes, Chaplin's contributions to the art of storytelling are pretty much unparalleled. Yet, despite his on-screen brilliance, Chaplin's private life was absolutely riddled with scandal and controversy, completely tarnishing the pristine image so many fans held of him. One of the most disturbing aspects of Chaplin's personal history was his obsession with significantly younger women. His first two wives, Mildred Harris and Lita Gray, were literal teenagers when he married them, which sparked widespread speculation about his predatory tendencies. Chaplin's controlling nature reportedly led to some seriously emotionally abusive dynamics in these relationships. The public's perception of Chaplin took a nosedive in the 1940s during a massive high-profile paternity suit brought against him by actress Joan Barry. While Chaplin was eventually cleared of the paternity claims, the trial dragged out sordid details of his personal life, leaving a permanent stain on his reputation. On top of that, Chaplin's political leanings caused significant controversy. Accused of harbouring communist sympathies, Chaplin faced relentless scrutiny during the height of the Red Scare. Ultimately, he chose to pack his bags, leave the United States, and live in exile in Switzerland, where he spent the remainder of his days. While his cinematic genius is still celebrated to this day, Chaplin's troubling personal choices and political battles remain a dark shadow over his enduring legacy. Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen embodied that rugged charm and rebellion in huge hits like Bullitt, The Great Escape, and The Magnificent Seven. His intense screen presence and natural charisma easily made him one of the biggest movie titans of the 1960s and 1970s. However, McQueen's off-screen life was fraught with difficulties stemming from a deeply troubled upbringing and an often abrasive personality. Raised in a chaotic environment marked by abandonment and abuse, McQueen's early hardships seemed to manifest in his adult relationships and professional demeanour. The guy was notoriously competitive and prone to jealousy, often creating thick tension on set. During the filming of The Towering Inferno, rumours say he insisted on having an equal number of lines as his co-star Paul Newman, even going so far as to count the words to ensure total parity. His pettiness extended into his personal life too, with one particularly bizarre incident involving his neighbour actor, James Garner. McQueen, apparently jealous of Garner scoring the starring role in the movie Grand Prix, allegedly urinated on Garner's balcony as a petty act of revenge. His personal relationships were equally tumultuous. McQueen's serial infidelity, controlling behaviour and volatile temper created a massive strain in many of his marriages and friendships. While his talent and star power remain undisputed, McQueen's erratic and often antagonistic behaviour painted a far more complicated portrait of Hollywood's quintessential tough guy. Gene Kelly. Gene Kelly is celebrated as one of Hollywood's most gifted performers, a true triple threat whose singing, dancing and acting completely revolutionised the musical genre. Films like Singin' in the Rain and An American in Paris showcased his extraordinary talent and enduring charm. Yet behind Kelly's dazzling smile was a relentless perfectionist whose demanding nature often bordered on straight-up cruelty. His obsessive push for perfection created a tense and at times hostile environment on set, particularly for the people sharing the screen with him. One of the most notable examples of Kelly's harshness went down during the filming of Singin' in the Rain. Debbie Reynolds, who was just 19 years old at the time, described working with Kelly as a grueling and traumatic experience. Kelly's relentless demands during rehearsals pushed Reynolds to the brink of physical exhaustion, often leaving her in tears. In one instance, she was actually forced to rehearse a complex dance sequence until her feet bled. Despite the pain, Reynolds soldiered on, but the experience left a lasting impression regarding Kelly's total lack of empathy. Kelly's difficult behaviour wasn't confined to just one production either. Actress Esther Williams, who worked with him on Take Me Out to the Ball Game, described Kelly as deeply insecure and competitive. His irritation with Williams's height led to some incredibly petty demands, including forcing her to slouch during scenes just to make him appear taller. While Kelly's immense talent and groundbreaking contributions to musicals are undeniable, his temperamental nature and harsh treatment of collaborators definitely tarnish his otherwise stellar reputation. And brace yourself, because next we have to talk about Kiefer Sutherland. Kiefer Sutherland first blew up worldwide as the gritty face of the smash hit Series 24, playing the unstoppable agent Jack Bauer. His intense, no-holds-barred acting style snagged him an Emmy and built a massive army of die-hard fans who loved his tough guy persona. But here is the kicker. Once the cameras stopped rolling, Sutherland's real-life behaviour was reportedly a total disaster and a constant source of major drama A bunch of his fellow actors and crew members have publicly slammed his attitude painting, a picture of a guy who was an absolute nightmare to work with. Freddie Prinze Jr., who starred alongside him in season 8 of 24, did not mince words when he went on ABC News, straight up calling Sutherland the most unprofessional dude he had ever met in the entire industry. Prince went as far as to say that the experience was so miserable it made him want to quit the acting business forever, which is a pretty damning accusation coming from a fellow star. Shori Agdashlu, another alum from the show, backed up those claims with her own horror stories. She tagged Sutherland as incredibly hard to deal with, pointing out his short fuse and a total lack of team spirit when they were trying to film scenes together. Agdashlu even hinted that her character getting killed off might have had less to do with the script and more to do with the massive tension in their strained working relationship. These behind-the-scenes accounts act as a total 180 from the heroic saviour we watched him play on TV every week, painting him instead as a volatile and divisive personality who created chaos wherever he went. Even with all his trophies and fame, his questionable behaviour has definitely burned some bridges and left plenty of colleagues with a bad taste in their mouths. Now let's talk about Tommy Lee Jones, who has built a reputation as one of the most talented but undeniably grumpiest legends in Tinseltown history. Sure, the man is a titan on screen, crushing roles in huge blockbusters like The Fugitive, No Country for Old Men and Men in Black, where he consistently delivers gold. But off the clock, that is a whole different ballgame. Jones is famously cold and distant, often described as dismissive or even straight up hostile when he runs into fans or reporters. He is legendary for shutting down autograph hunters and refusing to take photos, usually just walking away without even acknowledging people exist. When he is at work, that prickly personality apparently does not get any warmer. The wildest story comes from the set of Batman Forever, where he had to share the screen with the high-energy Jim Carrey. Carrey spilled the beans later, revealing that Jones looked him dead in the eye and told him, "I hate you. I really cannot sanction your buffoonery." That brutal honesty made for an incredibly awkward vibe on set, even if both actors managed to keep it professional enough to get the movie done. That kind of abrasive, no-nonsense attitude has become the stuff of folklore in Hollywood circles, sometimes even eclipsing his actual acting chops for the people unfortunate enough to cross him. Then you have Faye Dunaway, who is undeniably cinematic royalty, giving us iconic moments in classics like Bonnie and Clyde Network and Chinatown. But sadly, her brilliance on camera plays second fiddle to her reputation as arguably the biggest diva in the industry. People who have worked with her use words like erratic, impossible and scary to describe her vibe on set. One of the craziest allegations comes from the Mommy Dearest shoot, where co-star Rutanya Alder claimed Dunaway actually slapped her across the face for real. We aren't talking about a stage slap here. Alder was left visibly rattled and physically hurt by the unscripted hit, but Dunaway's difficult antics went way beyond getting physical. She actually got fired from a Broadway-bound production called Tea at 5 because she was making the workplace totally toxic. The backstage crew claimed she was chucking objects at people and screaming at the staff until they were breaking down in tears. And then it gets weird with rumours about bizarre hygiene habits, like her allegedly peeing in trash cans and refusing to flush toilets in her dressing room, which just added fuel to the fire. Even with all that drama, she is still a legend. But man, her legacy is definitely messy when you look at the off-screen behaviour. Rewinding a bit, Errol Flynn was the ultimate heartthrob. Back in the 1930s and 40s, the guy everyone wanted to be captivating crowds with his action-packed roles in hits like The Adventures of Robin Hood, Captain Blood and The Seahawk. With that million-dollar smile, charm and bad boy swagger, Flynn was the poster child for Hollywood's golden age glitz. But his real life was a train wreck of scandals, reckless decisions and legal nightmares that make today's stars look like saints. The biggest bombshell dropped in 1942 when he got slapped with statutory rape charges involving two teenagers. The trial turned into a massive media circus, with every salacious detail splashed across every newspaper in the country, even though the jury ultimately let him off. His reputation was trashed forever, birthing the slang phrase "in like Flynn" to describe his smooth-talking ways with women. Aside from courtrooms, the guy was drowning in booze-chasing skirts and throwing parties that were the stuff of legend. His bank account was just as messy as his love life. He made a fortune, but blew it all on bad investments and living like a king without a care for tomorrow. That fast-lane lifestyle caught up with him, fast wrecking his health, and he died way too young at just 50 years old. While we remember him as the dashing hero on screen, the man behind the curtain had a much darker, tragic reality that fueled the legend Kirk Douglas. Now, Kirk Douglas was an absolute titan during the studio era, known for an intensity that could cut glass. When you think of the absolute titans of the golden age of cinema, Kirk Douglas is right at the top, delivering powerhouse performances in masterpieces like Spartacus and Paths of Glory. While history remembers him for his chin-cleft charisma and his gutsy move to break the Hollywood blacklist during the McCarthy communist witch hunts, the reality behind the scenes was much grimmer. A truly disturbing allegation surfaced decades later, long after Douglas had left us, when Lana Wood, Natalie Wood's sister, dropped a bombshell accusing the icon of sexually assaulting Natalie back when she was just a 16-year-old rising star, even though these horrific claims only made headlines well after Douglas had passed away. They have permanently stained his legacy, forcing fans to reconcile the hero on screen with the alleged predator off it. But that wasn't an isolated whisper. Douglas had a notorious reputation in Tinseltown as a serial womanizer. Rumours swirled for years that he used his A-list power to manipulate and exploit young starlets, engaging in countless affairs that left a wake of broken hearts and hushed-up scandals. Then there is the cold case of Jean Spangler, an actress who vanished into thin air in 1949. Police found a cryptic note in her purse that simply read Kirk, fueling rampant speculation that Douglas might have been tangled up in her disappearance, while authorities never found concrete evidence linking him to the crime. The association hung over his head like a dark cloud, cementing his reputation as a man whose life was riddled with buried secrets and moral ambiguity. Despite his monumental impact on the film industry and his championing of political freedom, the ugly details of Douglas's personal conduct remain a massive, unignorable blemish on what was otherwise a legendary career. Now let's talk about Sean Connery. He will forever be immortalised as the original James Bond, the role that rocketed him to international superstardom and defined him as the ultimate Hollywood alpha male. With his smooth accent, debonair charm and magnetic presence, he was arguably the most idolised leading man of his generation. But strip away the tuxedo and the gadgets, and Connery's real-life persona was seriously problematic. In a now infamous 1965 interview with Playboy Connery, stunned readers by casually stating, "I do not think there is anything particularly wrong with hitting a woman." Instead of apologising, he doubled down on this toxic viewpoint, explaining that an open-handed slap was totally justified if the situation called for it. You would think the backlash would have stopped him, but Connery stood his ground. Decades later, during a sit-down with Barbara Walters, he shocked the audience again by reaffirming his stance, bluntly telling her, "I have not changed my opinion." Connery's disturbing take on domestic disputes wasn't the only thing that rubbed people the wrong way. He was notorious for being a nightmare on set, frequently getting into heated feuds with directors and fellow actors. His legendary stubbornness often crossed the line into pure arrogance, creating a tense atmosphere wherever he worked and straining professional relationships to the breaking point. So despite his undeniable talent and his massive contribution to cinema history, Connery's outdated and frankly dangerous attitudes have left a complicated, messy legacy that fans and critics are still debating in 2026. Then we have Steven Seagal. Back in the 1990s, Siegel was one of the biggest action heroes on the planet, famous for his Aikido moves and blockbusters like Under Siege and Hard to Kill. But behind the ponytail and the tough guy act, his reputation in the industry is an absolute train wreck. Siegel has faced a mountain of accusations ranging from abusive behaviour and harassment to having an ego so massive it made him impossible to work with. One of the craziest stories comes from the set of Executive Decision, where things got physical. Siegel reportedly assaulted actor John Leguizamo just for laughing. According to Leguizamo, Siegel slammed him against a brick wall simply because he chuckled during a rehearsal, which perfectly illustrates Siegel's volatile and bullying nature. But it is his behaviour toward women that is truly stomach-churning. Jenny McCarthy came forward alleging that during her audition for Under Siege 2, Siegel demanded she strip down, claiming it was necessary for the part, even though the script had absolutely zero nudity in it. She wasn't the only one. Other stars like Portia de Rossi and Juliana Margulies have shared eerily similar horror stories. Margulies recounted a terrifying ordeal where Siegel insisted on a private meeting and brought a gun along, creating a deeply unsafe and threatening vibe that no one should ever have to endure. Despite hitting it big early on, Siegel's reputation for unchecked arrogance, gross misconduct and unprofessionalism has completely torched his standing in Hollywood. While some die-hard fans still watch his old movies, his personal actions have left a permanent stain on his history. Finally, let's look at Meg Ryan. There was a time when she was America's sweetheart, winning everyone over with that bubbly charm in rom-com classics like When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, and You've Got Mail. But her Golden Girl image took a massive hit in the early 2000s after a series of scandals wrecked her public standing. The biggest blow came during the production of Proof of Life, when Ryan got entangled in a super publicised affair with her co-star Russell Crowe. The fling was tabloid gold, but it led to the messy collapse of her marriage to actor Dennis Quaid and brought a tidal wave of bad press her way. It wasn't just her love life, though. Stories about her on-set attitude started to hurt her career too. Insiders and crew members began leaking reports that she had morphed into a difficult diva, demanding special treatment and constantly locking horns with the people trying to make her look good. Her role in the 2008 movie The Women was plagued by the same kind of chatter, with sources describing her as entitled, aloof and dismissive of others. These stories painted a picture that was a total 180 from the relatable girl next door persona she had built her entire empire on. While Ryan has mostly stepped back from the Hollywood spotlight these days, her dramatic fall from grace is a brutal reminder of just how fragile fame really is. Welcome to the dark side of Tinseltown. Wesley Snipes was once the undisputed king of cool, crushing it in massive hits like Blade White Men Can't Jump and the gritty New Jack City. But while the guy clearly had magic in front of the lens, the stories about his antics behind the scenes paint a picture of a man who was erratic, wildly unprofessional, and honestly straight up scary to work with. The production of Blade Trinity is legendary for all the wrong reasons, with Snipes reportedly spiralling into bizarre, disruptive diva behaviour that made the shoot a living nightmare. Comedian and co-star Patton Oswalt spilled the tea, revealing that Snipes stopped speaking to director David Goyer, entirely choosing to communicate solely through post-it notes that he signed as Blade. Talk about method acting gone wrong. He also alienated the entire cast and crew, locking himself in his trailer for hours on end, and allegedly demanding that everyone on set refer to him only by his character's name. But things went from petty to dangerous when the tension boiled over and Snipes reportedly tried to physically strangle Goyer during a heated on-set argument. And if the on-set chaos wasn't enough, Uncle Sam came knocking. In 2010, Snipes landed in serious hot water and served actual prison time for tax evasion. Neglecting to pay millions in taxes put a massive dent in his reputation and slammed the brakes on his momentum. While die-hard fans still love his classic roles, The baggage of his legal drama and impossible behaviour has definitely cast a long shadow over what could have been an even bigger career. Then there is Val Kilmer. Look, the guy's a genius. On screen, Tombstone, The Doors, Batman Forever, absolute classics. But in the industry, his on-set behaviour and abrasive personality have made him infamous as one of the most difficult stars in Hollywood history. We are talking about a reputation so bad that his feuds with directors and co-stars are the stuff of legend, leading many big players to vow they would never work with him ever again after just one movie. Joel Schumacher, who tried to wrangle him on Batman Forever, did not mince words, calling Kilmer childish and impossible, pointing to his explosive temper and total refusal to play nice during production. But it gets darker. Actress Caitlin O'Heaney dropped a bombshell allegation claiming Kilmer actually physically assaulted her during a pre-production audition for The Doors. She alleged that Kilmer struck her right across the face and shoved her to the floor, all while director Oliver Stone reportedly just stood there laughing and did absolutely nothing to stop it. O'Heaney eventually received a financial settlement to keep quiet about the traumatising ordeal, which really highlights the toxic enabling environment Kilmer allegedly thrived in. His antics on the set of The Island of Dr. Moreau sealed the deal with director John Frankenheimer, stating publicly that he would never ever hire Kilmer again. Despite having all the talent in the world, Kilmer's legacy is forever stained by a trail of burned bridges and blown opportunities that could have made him the biggest star of his generation. Switching gears, let's talk about Macaulay Culkin. As the face of the Home Alone franchise, he was the most famous kid on the planet, but growing up in the spotlight was anything but a fairy tale. Being the absolute icon of the 1990s came with a heavy price tag, and Culkin reportedly struggled with the immense pressure, leading to some rocky behaviour as he transitioned into adulthood. Fans who ran into him back then often described him as cold, dismissive and arrogant, a sharp, jarring contrast to the sweet Kevin McAllister image everyone loved. There is a famous story from the set of the 2004 film Saved, where a group of excited fans spotted Culkin and asked for an autograph. Instead of a friendly wave, Culkin reportedly ghosted them right to their faces, pretending to be glued to his cell phone until someone stroked his ego by complimenting his look. Aside from being rude to fans, Culkin's personal life became prime material for supermarket tabloids, fueled by rumours of heavy substance abuse and erratic public outings. This spiral, paired with a string of box office flops, basically put his career on ice for years. Now, in 2026, Culkin has made a low-key comeback and looks way healthier and happier. But those lost years in his early adulthood stand as a stark warning about the damage that unchecked fame can inflict, especially when you are thrown into the machine as a child. Hollywood has always been a place of smoke and mirrors, where we idolise these larger-than-life figures for their talent, while their deep personal flaws get swept under the rug. The 20 people we are breaking down in this series prove that immense fame and power often act like a magnifying glass for the worst human traits. Whether it is through physical abuse, total unprofessionalism, or self-destructive habits, these stars left behind a wake of chaos and controversy that permanently scarred their legacies. While their movies might have defined eras and entertained millions, their conduct when the cameras were off serves as a serious reminder that nobody should be above accountability. Behind all the red carpets and awards, these stories expose the ugly underbelly of the industry, where massive egos clashed, power was weaponized, and basic decency was ignored. These aren't just gossip stories, they are cautionary tales about how celebrity status can warp your reality and expose who you really are. As viewers, we are stuck with the age-old question of separating the art from the artist. Is it okay to love the movies while knowing the dark truth about the people in them? It is complicated, but one thing is crystal clear: we need to keep exposing the reality behind the Hollywood facade. By doing that, we honour the victims who spoke up and remind ourselves that even the brightest stars can cast the darkest shadows. We are diving straight into the absolute darkest shadows